Your friends, your friends. Radio friends again. Radio friends again. We've got a lot to share.
Well, welcome to another edition of Radio Friends again, August 16th, 2024. I'm Steve Parker here in Berlin, Connecticut. And of course, with all the news breaking this week regarding news radio, we thought we'd pull together some legitimate guests on this week's edition of the show. So let's just go around a little bit as people start to file in. We have a nice group here right now, and as they start to come in, we'll add them along because it's pretty much an open format here. Come in late, leave early. Anything but the way you can really do radio. I think radio is the only thing I always have to be on time. Anyways, let's go around the room and say good morning to Pete Salant. Hi, Pete. How are you?
And I am fine. Good morning to you, Steve, from beautiful Norfolk, Virginia. Looking forward to seeing you this weekend up in Portland.
For the big reunion.
Yeah.
Portland, Connecticut, for those of you that are just
right.
tuning in. I was Bob Sirkin, all the way from Arizona. Hi, Bob. How are you?
Hi. It's great to be with you guys again. Harvey, great to see you again.
Same here.
Let's see. We've got John Landry's here. Hi, John.
Good morning. How are you?
All right. John from
East Hampton.
Oh, okay, East Hampton, right. Ron Pell's here from the Shire. Hi, Ron.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Good morning.
And
No caller.
Okay. People are signing in as we're speaking. Let's see. I'm trying to do this so it all makes sense. So I'm jumping around a little bit here. Dave Overson is here. Hi, Dave.
Hey there, from Countryside RV Park in Griswold, Connecticut. Hello.
Bob Craig from Pennsylvania, right, Bob?
Out of Philly. Why would you want this to make sense, however?
It never does.
They're going to start something.
Ted Dalagoo from Florida. Hi, Ted.
Venice, Florida. Good morning, everybody. Good to see you again.
Good morning, Ted.
Ed Bruder's here. Hi, Ed.
Checking in from the northern frontier in Manchester, New Hampshire.
Okay, and I think Tracy Carmen is floating around somewhere. He's in and out of his car right now. And we've got a special guest this morning. We have all kinds of connections to our guest, Harvey Nagler. So we've got, let's see, this took a group effort to bring in. And we got another legitimate guy off to the side there, by the way. This is Pat Sheehan. Hi, Pat. How are you?
I'm doing fine. Coming to you from beautiful Cheshire, Connecticut.
I wasn't sure.
Another Shire guy.
Two from Cheshire. We're overrun.
This is tremendous to have all these great news guys.
Hey, Harvey, it's great to see you again.
It's same here.
We have Dick Culp, Barry Berman, Joe Connelly. Let's see, and carried Harvey into this and brought him into this world that he doesn't even know what we're doing here. So Joe, you were with me and the gang back at Big D. I know about your history there, but then you went off into the world of and you still took calls, and you'd still be there if we needed you, but you went into the mighty world of CBS. And tell us your connection to CBS and to Harvey.
Well, I just wrote a little introduction to Harvey here because he's been one of the most important people in my career. And I know that people will be watching this video afterwards, too. So I just want to tell you a little bit about Harvey. First, Steve, what struck me yesterday when this came up is that two great PDs have given me my career. One was your dad, Charlie Parker, and the other was this man, Harvey Nagler. Harvey hired me twice at RKO Radio Network and then at WCBS. And I want to tell you guys that Harvey was the most employee, talent, and staff supportive high-level manager who I ever knew. He saved dozens of people's jobs, and often the people whose jobs he saved never even knew that he had done that. I know because I was Harvey's assistant for some of those years, and I would know when management wanted to cut budgets and staffs, and I saw how Harvey built the case to the corporate hatchet men to avoid those cuts. And he did it in such a way that the CBS suits loved him too. Now that is a smart manager. Now Harvey tells me he's been on the phone all week with broadcasters in distress for their jobs now and sad about WCBS going off the air. So Harvey, my old friend, what are you telling all the people who are calling you now?
Boy, what a sad story. And thanks for the introduction. And yeah, just to set the record straight for those of you who don't know, I programmed WCBS for 10 years. I guess it was from 88 to 98. And then I went to the network for 18 years. And I've been retired for 8 years. And, you know, one of the things that, and I'm sure all of you guys feel the same way, because I could hear the friendship among you, is that it wasn't even the jobs, which were fabulous jobs and very important for the community, as many of you are seeing on Facebook pages in the response to the closing of WCBS, but it's the friendships that you make along the way. And I've been really blessed with the people that I've gotten to know over the 50 years that I was in the industry, and I call many of them my friends and colleagues. And it's just, it's so nice, because you've got people like Joe Connelly and Barry Berman and Dick Holt, and people whom you've known for decades, and you consider them friends. And it's so nice when you get to my age to realize that. So I missed your question, Joe. What did you want me to?
What are you telling? Where is radio going? What are you telling people who are calling you all week?
Well, first off, many of the people who were still at WCBS were people that I hired like 25 years ago. You know, Paul Murnane and Wayne Cabot and Bridget Quinn and many others are still there. Or will be there until Sunday night. And so they've reached out to me and I've reached out to them. And the main thing that I'm saying is it wasn't your fault. That this clearly was, in my view, upper corporate management decisions to close the radio station. Had nothing to do with the great staff that WCBS still has, and the people who work there, who have given their lives, who have families and children and all sorts of obligations. This was not of your doing. This was mainly an upper corporate decision. And for some of you who have looked at the history of Entercom and then Odyssey, as it was renamed, it's not a good one. They bought the CBS radio stations many years ago, and their stock price was $16 a share. Today, they're in bankruptcy. So what does that tell you? And it's a real trick to go from $16 a share into bankruptcy. And unfortunately,
not a good trick either.
You know, it's really sad, and it sort of tells you that the blame, if there is a blame, and I think there is, rests with upper management, and not anything to do with the people, the very talented people who have been working at that radio station all these years. And given their years, I think it was completely avoidable. There were times, even when I was at WCBS, where I suggested to upper management that they put the AM signal on a FM stick. And if that had been done years ago, I think the station would still be around today.
Where is there any hope for radio people, radio careers, Harvey?
Well, I think, you know, all of us realize that, particularly on the AM band, I think that unless you're really serving a niche community and you have a really solid audience and you have a really good sales plan, that you need to come up with other ways to monetize your product. All you need to do is look at the New York Times, when in 2014, they made their decision that people were not going to be reading newspapers anymore. And they went into digital and other platforms. And today they're a very viable company. Many, unfortunately, of the radio companies, and particularly the big radio owned and operated companies, didn't do that and have been somewhat blind to how to keep their existence, their stations alive, their assets alive. And I think that was that's a problem for the future, that unless, you know, you're out on other social platforms and you're out there distributing your product in as many different ways as you can and being very viable, you're going to go out of business. And you can't go into a Best Buy and say, I want to buy a radio, and they'll look at you as if you have horns on your head, which is what I did many years ago. And they looked at me as if I was crazy, because they're not selling radios in Best Buy anymore. So we need to be really careful about the future and plan for the future, and look ahead. Just as some of you may have realized in watching the Olympics, the plan that NBC Universal did in distributing the Olympic Games for the first time to all their different platforms everywhere. The NBA, the men's basketball team had, I think, 12 million viewers on a Saturday afternoon because of all the hype that went into it. And I think a lot of it was generated by the many social platforms, the influencers that NBC brought to Paris. Can you imagine? They brought influencers, social influencers to Paris to to market their product, something that was unheard of and would never have been done by anybody before. And clearly it's been extremely successful.
Harvey, I have a couple of quick questions for you regarding the CBS changeover. First of all, and only because I'm sure you have more insight than any of us in terms of what's going on corporately, or maybe not, but two questions. One, why would they go to a sports format if that's what they're doing when they own WFAN and there are 2 or 3 other sports formats in the market? And number two, that's the primary question. I mean, I don't, do they expect they're going to make money? Wouldn't they be stealing audience and revenue from their sister station?
Well, first of all, let me say that I have no insight. I don't have any more information than you do. But having said that, let me give you my observation. I suspect what happened was, number one, David Field is not a big fan of all news radio stations. They suck a lot of money out of it. It's hard to monetize it unless you've been really successful. So he's not a big fan. The guy who runs the company is not a fan of the all news.
Famous guy. Everybody knows him in radio.
Right. So what I think transpired is that Craig Karmazin, the deal was up with the stick that they were on. They had no place to go. They came to the corporate folks at Odyssey and said, do you have a stick we can put our signal on? And somebody in there said, well, this is a great opportunity. We can close down WCBS, which we're not in love with at this point. And clearly I can point to a myriad of programming things that they did that really made the demise of WCBS inevitable. They went to the corporate folks. The corporate said, hey, look, we can close down WCBS. We can save the salaries of 35 plus people. We're in really good shape. We're going to get anywhere. And I don't know what the number is because I don't know anybody that publicly has seen the number. I've seen numbers from $5 to $10 to $12 million that Karmazin is paying Odyssey for the rights to put their signal on 880. So they're going to get all of that money. They're going to save all of the money by closing down the radio station. To the point that you raise, which I don't understand, is WFAN. You're now going to have ESPN competing against your number one sports station, FAN. And if they're successful, they're going to take audience away from FAN and therefore lose money from FAN. How that.
And isn't there already an ESPN format? I thought that's where Michael Kay is. I thought there is an ESPN station.
Yeah.
Hey, can I jump in and add a couple? I hope I'm not breaking up, but can I keep in mind that? Hey, hi, Harvey. The guys, it was the original bad deal with Emmett. It was way too expensive. And when the LMA started, when Craig took it from ESPN and took over the LMA and Weapon, the old WEVD for us old timers, it was way too expensive. So they were already in the market on an FM and on an AM. So moving to just an AM and actually 2 AM, and the 2 AMs allow them to put full network programming on 1050, and then they can do more local stuff on 880. So they're not really adding a competitor. Odyssey wasn't. And I'm going to guess the number's around 10 million. I'm going to guess because the original deal with them was just so expensive. And they were like, no, we got to have it. We got to have it. And it was 15 mil plus. So I'm guessing he got a good deal. And you're right, Harvey. They're going to save a lot of money. They don't actually gain a competitor. It's just moving the signal.
Right.
Albeit the better signal of the two. WCBS a way better signal than Win. So.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, you can hear 880 in Massachusetts. I mean, it doesn't help you in a ratings war, but it's a far superior signal. And I suspect, TJ, that's exactly what happened.
Harvey,
this is also a guaranteed, whatever it is, 12 million a year, whatever the LMA lease amount is for Odyssey. So that's guaranteed. They don't have to sweat. They don't have to go out and sell. They just cash that check.
Yeah.
Right.
Harvey, Bob Serkin. First of all, I want to tell you, I remain indebted to you, grateful for the 5 years of work that you gave me. It was an honor. My question is, what happens financially to the long haulers like Bridget Quinn, Paul Vernane, Wayne Cabot? How protected are they?
It's interesting. I spoke to their union rep the other day, who I had great respect for. And, I always believed the most important people on your radio station are the people that work for you. And I made sure that they always got a good deal or tried to get a good deal, because these are the people that make the radio station. You guys know that. I mean, so, you want to look out for them. And I always did look out for all of my people. I think they're going to be fine in terms, I'm led to believe that the severance packages are legitimate, are fine, that all of that stuff is being handled on the up and up. Whether that ends up to be the case, I don't know. But as of yesterday, they were gonna be okay. Of course, their lives are uprooted. I mean, these were people who expected to live for a couple of more years at their radio station and have income, and now it's gone. I mean, I feel for them, the Tom Kaminskis of the world and Renee and Wayne and Bridget, all of those folks who've been with that radio station for years. All of a sudden, their lives were disrupted. I don't know of anybody who knew this deal was coming down. I've spoken to people at the radio station, and I've spoken to some of the CBS corporate people that I knew, and they had no idea that this was coming down. So this came down. It seems to me, and TJ may even know more than I on this, that this was a pretty quick decision that probably, and it was held very quiet. And then all of a sudden, boom, at 10 minutes after 10 on Monday morning, the word came out. Very sad.
And isn't it poetic justice or injustice that it was done at 10:10? As connected as I am, Harvey, I got to tell you, this one, I knew they were trying to find a station, but boy, I never saw this, man. Never saw 880 going to an LMA and switching to all sports. I mean, it was just crazy.
Yeah.
And by the way, Karmazin picks up the Mets, so he's got that expense. But imagine starting your year with 12 million accrued profit in the number one market. That's not bad. That's not a bad start to the year. So from an Odyssey standpoint, and for somebody that's in Chapter 11 and trying to figure it all out, probably a pretty smart move.
Yeah, it's probably a smart move. It is a lot of money, but let's not forget that this is a company that's highly leveraged and is in a lot of debt.
Yeah.
And they've got the George
Did anybody
Soros
try to sell it?
Finance.
Was it ever put on the market?
No, not to my knowledge.
I remember back when Rick Buckley was still alive, and we would gather every May down in Avalon for a Jimmy Thompson thing. And he got offered a crap load of money and said, "Nah, I don't think so." and the
Two
bottom
hundred
fell
and
out.
$50 million. I was there, and I spoke to him about it because I worked for him for 23 years. 250 million. I heard offered him.
Yeah, and the bottom fell out, and
Sure did.
nobody's going to. Nobody. I don't care how big a market it is. I mean, WABC was a cool deal for those folks, but who's going to pay the kind of money that they think? And I don't know what their trailing was, and I don't know what. I'm guessing people are probably getting 7, 8 trailing if they sell anything. But I can't imagine that there was a big buyer market, and to be able to pick up $60 million, I think it's a 5-year deal. To pick up $60 million is probably what they would have sold it for.
Harvey, do you have any insight into why the call letters are not going with the sale? The call letters are going away. Is that a corporate decision that they had a reservation on the calls?
No, my understanding is when the CBS radio stations were sold to Entercom, CBS gave permission to WCBS and KCBS in San Francisco to continue to use the call letters. My understanding is that those call letters are owned by CBS/Viacom/Paramount, whatever you call that company these days. So they probably revert back to CBS at this point. So there's probably some language in that agreement. It's not Entercom or Odyssey's to use or to give away. I suspect it is still owned by the CBS Corporation.
And was this management that made the decision to sell the same management that sort of booted the CBS FM decision a few years ago when they dropped oldies, or was that a different corporate setup?
No, that's the Entercom Odyssey deal. Yeah.
You mean when they went to Jack?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think so. I could be wrong. At my age, I forgets things, but I think that's probably
the individuals who did that are no longer there. Joel Hollander. Yeah, it was him, and then the other guys.
And is that when they made that infamous statement that when it comes to music, CBS don't know Jack, or what was the headline that was so great? Unbelievable.
That's right.
Harvey, do you think that George Soros has a lot to do with this since he put a ton of money into it?
No, I think this is purely a David Field. Soros is just making noises about buying the company. I don't think he's in any position, and I'm telling you once again, I have no inside information on this, but I'm sure that George Soros is a nightmare for David Field, because if Soros takes over the company, Soros may give Field 6 months to survive, and then he'll be out of a job.
Yeah.
So Soros, and there's no love lost, I suspect, between David Field and George Soros. And that's the son that you're talking about. You're not talking about Soros. You're probably talking about his kid.
Excuse me. I just want to go around the room one more time, because we've had quite a few people join us in the last few minutes, and we are honored to have us as one of our guests today is Harvey Nagler. And Harvey was PD and vice president of both CBS and CBS Radio Network for decades. And according to Joe Connelly, if you were out of work or needed a favor, it was always call Harvey. So that's why we're calling on Harvey, because we figure a lot of people might be in the same shoes even before this all happened. So everybody, we should put up Harvey's number and his email and everything else at the end. Call Harvey. We'll be Harvey's new position here. So
anytime.
So let me just glance around the room a little bit. We had gone through before, and if I miss anybody, but TJ Lambert has said quite a few things, and TJ has quite a connection with Harvey, as I understand, and that's why he's been chiming in. And TJ from New Mexico this morning, right, TJ?
Yes, sir. High in the mountains and a beautiful, clear day.
Oh, thank you so much for being here with us. And as I said before, Pete Salant is here. We got Bob Serkin, John Landry's here, Ron Pell, let's see, Bob Craig, Dave Overson, Joe Connelly, Ted Daliku, Pat Sheehan, Ed Bruder, Dick Kalt, Greg Simonson, Tracy Carmen. Let's see, there's Carl Smith over there. There's Jim Harrington over there. And of course, this is just, I'm just.
This Barry, Steve, Barry Berman.
Oh, wait, no, that's because I wanted to bring Barry and Dick in there. Barry and Dick, your connection, please, to Harvey, only because of the fact that you guys, this was like a team effort to bring Harvey onto the show. That's why I was kind of holding off there. Go ahead. Barry?
Barry, you are muted.
Dick, take it.
Okay, well, while Barry figures out about how to unmute his video. No, we've known Harvey for a long time. Barry in particular established a relationship with Harvey some time ago. We'd done a lot of work in New York, and we'd worked with WCBS, but Harvey always gave us some tremendous insight into how because we were a news organization, who better to really get involved with and converse with than Harvey, because he totally understands the dynamic of developing a high quality and impactful news format, and then managing an organization to maintain that quality and to maintain a staff and keep a staff with tremendous talent. And we have the greatest respect for Harvey and have kept our relationship going for a long time. And I have to tell you that the whole situation in the news with CBS was so shocking. And the first thing I thought of when I was talking to Barry, I said, so we gotta, because I know Barry had just talked to Harvey not long ago, we've got to get Harvey to join us, because he's got to be able to give us some insights. But I will, let me ask you this very quickly, and then I think, Barry, I know you want to offer your comment, but I'll forget this, because this is what I do, I forget. Harvey, they are going to maintain the network news product itself, though, still. Is that still true?
I hope so. I actually spoke to one of the network executives that's still there the other day. It's a little convoluted agreement between CBS Radio News, Skyview, and the Odyssey folks. The deal has to do with all of the CBS All News Radio stations. So there's not a WCBS deal with the network. It's all combined with all the news stations. And as you would suspect, it has to do with inventory and compensation and all the rest of that sort of stuff. And they are, even as of today, discussing about how that's going to be changed. So I wish I could give you some insights into what is going to happen, but I don't think anybody knows, because there's no deal on the table as of today to figure out how all of that is going to come together. My hope and assumption is that the network will continue to be viable, will continue to do the job the outstanding job that they do, and will because some of you are probably saying, so where is what's going to happen to the network in New York? And that's still an open question as to where you'll be able to hear their content in the coming days. I suspect in the next week or two we'll know the answer to that as well. But all of that is still under discussion, because as we mentioned, this came down pretty quickly, and I don't think there were very many people who knew what was happening here.
Well, and if the network product itself should be decomposed, let's say, there aren't a lot of options out there for radio stations that have a high dependency on that.
Part of the problem is that the all news stations from your network providers usually have a lot of inventory attached to it. So if there were like 66 minutes a week for WCBS to play, where are you going to put that inventory now? And so that's part of the issue. What that portends for the other all news radio stations around the country, I'm not sure if there are real ramifications to it, because when I was there, we had 600 affiliates, and while it's unfortunate to lose WCBS for a lot of reasons, obvious reasons, you can replace them, and even on some of your FM radio stations, as you guys well know, the value of the inventory on the FM stations is probably a lot more than on some of the AM radio stations. So I don't think that the network is in jeopardy. It's just a question of trying to figure out what the process is going to be, and how they replace WCBS in the view of advertisers.
Yeah.
Harvey, you mentioned before.
My thought as a former network guy is ABC We always had a great relationship, as Harvey will tell you, with WINS. And they carried, inventory, top of the hour news. They were a full affiliate. We did a lot of stuff for them, a lot of live stuff for them. And then CBS carried CBS. Now, there's a couple of things. They could keep the inventory and pay comp to Greg and just clear that inventory. And that would help offset his LMA fee. And then, or they may move off of, if I'm an ABC guy and I'm still on WINS, and I don't know that they still are, but if I was, I'd be worried about that CBS News would move to WINS and the CBS, and then Carmen's out and ABC's out of the market.
Yeah, I don't think that Craig's going to run any of the CBS inventory, but I think it's an open question, and I think there's a lot of discussions that are going to be held in the next week or two to try to figure that out.
Harvey, you mentioned putting the stick on an FM several years ago, which probably would have made sense, because I think what's happening, and correct me if I'm wrong, NPR, public radio, which now is really a news service-based organization, is all FM. I mean, up here in Connecticut, we have WNPR, and they have 5 or 6 different sticks or processors around the translators around the state. And they're all over the country, and they have 2 strong shows in Morning Edition and All Things Considered, which are news programs, and they do a terrific job, and I think reach a much broader audience. The problem, as we know, and I sold AM radio for many, many, many years, is that we're all old guys, well, relatively speaking, and who under the age of 40 is listening to AM radio, especially a news radio station?
Well, you're absolutely right, but also keep in mind, and if you Google this on a search on NPR in the last 2 weeks, you will find that WNYC in New York is cutting back dramatically, laying off people because the ratings aren't what they used to be. NPR nationally is also laying off people and cutting budgets significantly, so that the loss of listenership on the AM and FM dial is adversely impacting even the NPR stations who were competing with the all news stations in a major way. So it's not good news for the industry as a whole, and the industry needs to find different ways to put its product out there on social platforms and podcasts and everything else. And it's not easy, but that's the only way that the industry and all of these people who are in it are going to be able to survive in the future.
So where's the audience going?
Any of the all news formats, I know Washington did go over to an FM stick a long time ago. Are any of the all news formats making money in any major market, or is social media simply elbowed out the entire format of all news?
Yeah, the smart ones are, if you're talking about the WTOP Washington move, the WTOP, if I'm not mistaken, is still the largest revenue earner of all radio stations in the country. And under Joel Oxley has done a great job in keeping that radio station relevant. And he's done it by, expanding on social platforms and coming up with creative programming to make things happen. I think that we need to be more creative in the way that we approach our product. I mean, Joe will tell you that, I guess it was 1992, I think, Joe, when BBR started, and we were like, oh my God, we're going to be competing against a business radio station. So what did we do? We started doing business breakfasts and increasing the profile. We sort of had a gun to our head, I thought, in realizing that there was going to be a business competitor, and that might be an all news competitor, and we might be really hurt. So we boosted up our business image. And guess what? Joe made a lot of money for the radio station because they had all these business breakfasts that, exist today. And Joe is still doing all that sort of stuff. So we just need to be more creative in what we do and how we do things to get the word out that we're special. If you look at at the WCBS Facebook, there are hundreds and hundreds of people who have signed on and said, "Oh my God, this is the radio station that I've lived with all my life." It's, as Debbie Rodriguez told me the other day, it was sort of the wallpaper of my life. That everything I do, it revolves around this radio station, and people love this radio station. And I'm sure all the radio stations that you guys worked for, you had listeners who just adored you and loved you and depended on you. And I think sometimes we take that for granted, but it's really important to know that the jobs that you guys did was extraordinarily important, continues to be important. And I think that to some extent was lost on the owners of Odyssey to realize how important that radio station is to the 16 million people in the tri-state area.
Harvey?
I think I mentioned once before we got into this kind of discussion, that here in Philadelphia, KYW, which is All News Radio, is at 1060. A few years ago, they simulcasted and have on their FM the All News format. They never mentioned 1060, even though they do broadcast. Well, the FM has it, but they have settled into like a 5.5, 5.6, 5.7 share, which is about 3 shares below what they used to be. When I got here in '79, they were the #1 station, hands down, especially in morning drive. But I don't, really see them progressing much more than that. And I think that maybe that 5.8, 5.6 share is saleable. It's it's saleable. It's something you can sell in a market the size of Philadelphia. Also, I don't know, this is kind of a Land of Oz thing. To all of us pretty much who are getting into the biz in the 60s, 70s, in that area, I often feel that sometimes we were put on the face of the earth to fulfill this fantasy that we had growing up, that radio, as we knew and loved it, would always be there, would always, be the same approach to take and the same type of audience. But we were just so lucky to be at that time where we had heroes, we had role models, we had station formats that were diverse, they were interesting. And when we pretty much got into it in the 60s, maybe even into the 70s, it was still viable. It was fun. It was the radio business, not the business of radio. And if you were into it in the 70s and 80s, it was still had a lot of dynamics to it that were very appealing. Listenership was great. Demos were great, whatever you wanted to pull out for yourself. And then in the 90s, when the LNA started, that's when things really began to change. So I don't know, I can maybe not speak for the rest of you, but I just
don't
really
you get the impression
lucky at that point to be part of this thing. And now we can sit back and pretty much take a look at what's transpired in recent years and be very critical of it as well.
The thing I feel, though, is that, and maybe it's just I am an old guy, that I think AM radio stations, for the most part, management en masse, I mean, the whole industry, they kind of gave up on AM about 15 years ago. I mean, they stopped aggressively marketing it. It's a product. And do you see incredibly creative advertising campaigns for radio stations anymore on TV? No, they're not there. And I guess what I'm saying is that, they allowed the impression of being obsolete to fester. They did this to themselves instead of going out and being something special. And when you said they don't put 1060 on their don't mention it anymore in Philadelphia, why not? Why wouldn't they do both? Why wouldn't they mention both? Do they combine both numbers? Do they get any numbers at all on the AM that they can combine with the FM to make it even a better sale?
I've never seen any kind of rating breakdown for that at all. All I know is that where I live outside of Philly, the AM signal actually comes in better for me than the
Yeah.
FM signal.
Don't you
But
think that
our-
they don't aggressively market the stations you mentioned, TOP? They probably have a good campaign going in DC, but
Well, part of the problem is it costs money to advertise. They don't want to
but
spend that kind of money.
you got to spend money to make money, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
but they don't. They tell that to the.
but no, this
as
is
Harvey was saying,
radio.
tell that to the upper guys. Tell the guys that are running the
Heck,
company.
I spent 50 years in this business. I know what you're talking about. And a lot of guys in the front office, they're not the great marketing geniuses that you hope they would be. They love it when it's making numbers and doing well, but when the thing isn't working well, it's like, well, what can we do next? It's like they throw it away as opposed to fixing it.
Bob Craig, the guy in Philly who owned, I think he passed away, who owned that AC, the famous AC station, he would spend millions. Yeah, he would spend Jerry Lee. He would spend millions of dollars a year in marketing to protect his share. He knew he had iHeart and Entercom, all these major companies, and he was a standalone owner. He knew, Rick Buckley used to talk about that all the time, being a standalone owner in Connecticut, that Jerry Lee would spend millions to protect his brand and protect his share, no matter what it would take. And it worked for decades.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was really into marketing in a very unique way, even well before I got here in the early 60s, where he had one of the two beautiful music stations. And what he did, and some stations have done this as well, he had as a promotion a radio that was set only to 101 FM. And he distributed to all these businesses that were willing to play his radio station. So if you walked into a restaurant, again, this is before I got here, but this is in the late 60s, perhaps, and you would walk into a store, place of business, and there was Easy 101 playing. And people would say, hey, what station is that? But they could never change the dial because it was always set to 101.1. So he was always into this creative marketing. I worked for him for maybe, 5 months. I was out of WMGK. And let me tell you something, it's strictly by the consultant's handbook. And I felt like a paint by numbers program director when I was there. I just couldn't create and do what I would like to do. But it really worked for him. And through the years, right up until the day he sold it, he was strictly a guy that affected the consultants, I guess more so than the air talent, which was virtually, pushed aside, going back to the beautiful music days when people who were on the air were just basically announcers.
One of the things that I wanted to mention, which is the sales situation. You now have at these radio stations salespeople who are in their 20s and 30s, and they have no idea what all news radio stations do or news stations do. Right. And what one of the things that seemed to me evident in the Odyssey situation is that there used to be sellers just for the radio station who knew the station inside out, who would go to advertisers. We'd have cocktail parties. We'd do this, we'd do that, just for the radio station. Now the sellers are selling the FM stations. And oh, by the way, we have an AM stick that, if you want to buy advertising on, fine. And if you don't, it's okay too. So the sellers at the radio stations have no idea what this AM station is all about, or the history, or what it can do. And as we've said, the successful ones now are on FM, and those are the ones that are going to survive.
Yeah, we ran into that. We ran into that recently with WDRC, and that was a couple of years ago, where they were, the oldest radio station in Connecticut, and they were going to be, celebrating 100 years. And I got a hold of John Fuller, who owns it now. And I said, what are you planning for the 100th? And he goes, we'll do something. And I said, well, he says, no one's reached out to me. And I said, well, with my background, they've reached out to me. I'm reaching out to you. What are you planning? And he really wasn't. And the sad part is right now you've got WTIC, Odyssey, but we have one young man in there. And I say young, and I mean this, he's in his probably mid to late 30s. His name is Morgan Cunningham. He's got the pipes of a guy that could easily be in his mid 50s. but he's got a passion for radio, passion for AM, and he understands it. The only way that we could be celebrating 100 years of WTIC across 3 years is a guy like that who did the research. And now he basically built a plan that Odyssey never could have done. We also have a woman running the organization now by Stephanie, in the name of Stephanie Pearl, who understands the history of the radio station in the market and the importance. But I venture to say, if you didn't have people like between Stephanie and Morgan Cunningham in that huge building, a 50,000 watt Travelers Insurance Company, which, by the way, most people don't know that's what TIC even stands for anymore. That's a sad thing.
That's right.
And if you didn't have that kind of sales creativity as well as passion for the radio station behind it, they wouldn't be doing it. You've got the same thing going on right now down in Milford, I think with Connoisseur. They've got ICC at 98 years or whatever. And they're going to be they're already working on milking that, making sure they're getting the most out of it. But when I sold to TIC, I had guys leaving, that was in the late 90s. I had guys leaving there that were heading out on the road, salespeople that didn't have Bob Steele's picture in a media kit. And I'm going, that's like going out to talk about the Yankees without Babe Ruth. So it is that there's nobody getting people. When I was involved with Liberty and SFX and all that coming in, they wanted me to stay after I quit because I was the only one who understood how to sell news radio with WPOP. And that's what you're saying basically is nobody's taken that passion and brought it into the generations that are coming. And if that's not there, how do you get excited about selling an AM station if you don't even get excited about AM yourself?
Do you think AM? Interesting. You guys think AM has gone the way FM started? I mean, before when I was at DRC, jocks would come in and they would work on the FM. That was like the farm club for the AM station. Yeah. And then if they go over to the AM station, wow, they made it big. Now it's kind of totally reversed. Well, now they've got two separate formats, so that doesn't matter. But do you feel that AM has gone the way of FM when it started?
It's funny that you bring that up because I was going to say the same thing, because I remember in the 60s that FM signals were basically, they sat there because broadcasters really didn't know what to do with them. They were concerned about overall coverage, and they were basically tax write-offs until you started going with Schilke and beautiful music and doing something a little bit different and then bringing some life to it. But a couple of concerns that I have, and I talk to Jeff Warshaw all the time over at Connoisseur. They have become very dependent on social media, and if you can integrate that connection through social media, whether it be an AM signal or an FM signal, it still adds an opportunity to connect to a demographic or a generation that has no concept of what an AM radio station is.
Yeah, I remember there. I remember
and the other problem too is there are 15,000 radio stations or 15,000 licenses in this country. There are countries in Europe that nationalized AM frequencies and took them back. And then reassigned them to other communications. Norway basically took AM off the air and reused them for other purposes. I wonder how long it will take before, with enough congressional pressure and the fact that the auto manufacturers are not too excited about keeping AM in their cars, how long it's going to be before that might happen when they can say 90% of the reach of radio is on FM anyway.
Isn't Canada doing away with AM as well?
Pardon me?
Isn't Canada doing away with AM as well?
There is a lot of talk about that. I mean, and there's some gigantic, I grew up with CKLW. I can't even fathom CKLW not being on the air. Yet, why? Well, we have 15,000 signals.
Hey, Dick, to your point, in Sweden, when I have a Swedish car, there's no AM radio in it.
Yeah.
I remember when Wayne Mulligan told me the story that when he was at DRC as a board op, and he was the assistant chief engineer there, the FM went off the air, and they were simulcasting on FM from the AM station. And he said to the chief engineer, Ted Hitchcock, he says, "Hey, the FM went off the air." And Ted says to him, Well, when you get out there in the next couple of days, see if you can get it back on. I mean, that shows
that was most recent even in 1970. Jim, you can back me up on that. If the FM went off, we'll get to it.
Yeah, but I mean, it was, when he said, "Oh, okay," and and they just kind of shrugged it off. In the 70s, when I was there, FM was, a viable market. You had to make sure that get it on the air, because I remember one of the engineers and I walked up Meriden Mountain because of an ice storm, and we had to bring this nitrogen tank up there and to get the FM back on the air. And it was a totally different story back then.
Well, that's why we're all radio friends. We've been together through all the storms, and I had to lug the transmitter to the top of the mountain. Pete has a nice audio piece here that he has of the first 15 seconds of the debut of CBS 880. I thought it might be kind of neat to listen to that, and I want to thank Pete for putting that together. Pete, you want to roll that?
Yes, I will. And first, I want to say that Dave is going to put up a few links to other interesting audio pieces from WCBS on the playback of YouTube. The WCBS originally debuted in 1967 when, after a light plane crashed into the shared WCBS WNBC transmitting tower on High Island in the Bronx, and they had to debut it on the FM. At the time, of course, it didn't matter. FM didn't matter, so they debuted it on the AM, and the first two anchors were Steve Porter and Charles Osgood, and this is the way it started.
Good morning. This is Steve Porter welcoming you to WCBS News Radio 88. Because of an accident yesterday, an aircraft knocking over our AM transmitter tower, WCBS FM will carry our new broadcasting concept until WCBS AM facilities are repaired. WCBS time is 5:30 in the morning, and weather is behind most of the news.
And it goes on, but that's the way it sounded. It was very dry back in the day. I think there were 2, maybe 3 maximum pieces of sound during this first hour, but just a very interesting start and an inauspicious start to WCBS News 88.
Well, I tell you, Barry, when we went back a few weeks ago and Barry talked about the whole genesis behind the Connecticut Radio Network, which was the news network then. I mean, you and Dick both counted on Harvey to really get this thing going and making it legit, I'm sure. So Barry, what about your connection with Harvey?
So I'll give you a story. I can't remember when Harvey and I met, but it's been probably right after Adam and Eve. So this is going back, perhaps 40 years or so ago. And the story involves Joe Connelly and Harvey. So I'll tell you this one. We had a client, or we were getting a client, and we ultimately succeeded at it. The client was HIP, which stood for the Health Insurance Plan of New York City. And so what we wanted to do, what we thought about, is because HIP was really for small businesses in New York State. And so we started thinking about what we should do, and we thought about business reports, and we thought that all business reports on radio at that time were not relevant to small businesses. They had stock market stuff. It was all, the Fortune 500, and had no relevance to a small business. And Dick and I were running a small business. And so we wanted to create the first small business report. And Harvey and I got together on this, and to do it on WCBS. And we started thinking about who should do the report. So we both, I guess, came to the idea, let's get Joe Connelly. So I called Joe up, and he's right now, I think he was gardening in Vermont, Joe, I think.
Yeah, I fled up there for a year or so. Yeah.
He's up there, and Joe's a news guy. So I said, Joe, I think I want to produce a small business show. And he said, well, I don't know anything about business. And I said, that's exactly the reason why we wanted to do this. We wanted somebody who did not come from a business head and could create and had the curiosity of understanding what this was all about. And so, and Harvey had the guts enough. I mean, he worked with Joe and he knew Joe's talent, but guts enough to put a guy on WCBS who knew nothing about business. And we created the Small Business Report. And we did that for a couple of years with HIP. And then, of course, it was a big success. And then we didn't have a sponsor anymore for that, but Joe was able to succeed on WCBS thanks to Harvey, and with us,
and you.
And we gave a little push to it, but that was probably one of the most successful shows WCBS ever had. So that's one little story of that. And I think I had another story, but age being what it is, I forgot the other story.
But those breakfasts though, and the way, I mean, I've always been a CBS listener, and I for a long time I was buying over there from a rep named Barbara Babian, and I would buy for Lux Bond and Green, because I would say, it doesn't get any better, more credible than being on CBS. But boy, oh boy, I'll tell you, when they would promote Joe and Bill's business breakfast, my God, I couldn't help but smile knowing Joe as many years as I had. And Joe is a guy that found a way, and Pat, Pat Sheehan especially, he'll know. I mean, it gets pretty tough in that business world and news world to balance those two. And somehow Joe was able to not just approach it, but dive into it. And I love the pictures with the headset on, and he's in the middle of the whole thing. And you got Joe Connelly there doing these business breakfasts, and advertisers couldn't wait to be there. It was huge.
It was successful for a couple of reasons. One is that business owners, I don't necessarily call them small anymore because it's a little bit of an outdated term connoting mom and pop. Business owners are really good people in general. They're involved in their community. They tell you straight how things are. It's not a news release going through corporate public relations and legal and everything. So I immediately took a liking to business owners. And they support the Little League often in their town and that type of thing. But also it worked for me because any good reporter can go into a new beat and learn it. And I found it very educational. I was learning and sharing that with people. What a great job that was. And we continued to make revenues off of that until recently. And now actually I'm doing WCBS small business breakfast-like events for some companies. And I'm doing a CBS business breakfast essentially for an appliance dealers trade show.
Love it.
Where I interview the appliance dealers and get people to tell their stories.
I think Joe is underselling himself just a little bit here. One of the reasons I think that we had success at these radio stations and at the network is it's not brain surgery. What you want to do is be relevant. And Joe was an extraordinary communicator of talking to people, because we're all talking from somebody in a studio to one person who's listening, to talk about what people are interested in and make it relevant to your life, and to talk about things that you as the listener want to know about. And Joe was an extraordinary communicator of talking to people the way that they could understand what was going on in the business, or he was a fabulous storyteller, which is what people know. There are very few people like Joe, even in the world today, who can communicate in the way that he communicates to people. And I think if there was any success that we enjoyed at the radio station, it was to talk about what people were interested in, whether it's news or traffic or weather, or, just talk to them about about things that affected their lives. And that, in fact, I think was the key to success. And it's a pretty simple philosophy, a little bit more difficult to espouse, to figure out. But at the end of the day, if you can talk to people about things that matter, you're going to be successful.
Yeah. But the way you were able to bring the worlds together, I'm sorry, Bob, the way from a sales standpoint, I always loved the fact that CBS would dive into a commercial. They wouldn't just have it wouldn't just be an anchor. An anchor would go right into selling mattresses or selling, so close to my heart, but they would always have a way to really get passionate. But CBS having a newscaster talking about an advertiser, it doesn't get much more credible. The subliminal credibility that goes along with that advertiser is phenomenal. And somewhere point in time, my dad was really good at bringing all the worlds together. That's what he did as a program director. He could bring them all together, sales and news and everybody. But at some point in time, you get to the thing, well, no, we don't want to talk about that because of this and this. It was the way that CBS was able to embrace that. And even on POP back in the day, when you would have a reporter actually do a commercial, that's priceless for an advertiser.
Yeah. Harvey, it's Bob again. I want to ask you a little bit about how you made the sausage, so to speak, when you were programming WCBS. What were you looking for in the great people that you hired to create the sound of WCBS? I got to tell you, as you know, I worked at KNX for a couple of years, and it's a great storied radio station. But to me, it never had the sound of WCBS. There's something about the urgency of WCBS's sound. What did you look for in the people that you hired?
Passion, that they were passionate about the business, that they could communicate on a one-on-one situation. I did not, the time that I sort of came into WCBS, you were sort of making the transition from the voice of God to the people who would actually talk to you and about what you were interested in. And, that's a real talent. To be a storyteller and to talk to people that they understand and feel relevant and feel comfortable with, like they're your relative, day in and day out, is an extraordinary talent. And to all of you folks who are on this call, I'm sure you realize how important that is, because most of you have been pretty successful and have succeeded in the business because you are down to earth, you're relevant, you're great storytellers. So if you combine that with the strategy of the radio station, which in WCBS's point, as a news station, is that we tried to build up an image that when the shit hits the fan and there's a news station, there's only one place to turn on the dial, and that was WCBS, by making sure that you covered stories. It just comes to my mind, when the Pope came to New York back in the 90s, Rich Lamb, who was a phenomenal communicator and is a fabulous storyteller, comes in my office, and I called him in and I said, so what are we going to do about the Pope? And what we decided to do was send Rich to Rome and travel with the Pope coming in, so that if you wanted to know about the Pope, we would promo it in advance that there was only one place to know what the Pope was doing, and that's to be on WCBS. And you wanted to own all of those major stories. You wanted to own it before the event, you wanted to own it during the event, and you wanted to own it after the event and tell people what you did. And that was really important. From promotion also was really important to the radio station. So I think there were lots of ways that we were successful, not only at the local station, also brought that to to the network that when the shit hits the fan, you want to be the only news, you want to be the station that you turn to, that your listeners know that you're going to be covering it. And I think that WCBS succeeded in doing that.
Harvey, I think one of the things that you always did with those stations was brilliance in its simplicity. And what you just shared was exactly that. And it's common sense and simple and brilliant. And it was always a joy to listen to it whatever market I lived in. And I lived in a lot of them where CBS had all news stations. So
I appreciate it. Brilliant, I think, is probably too strong a word, though.
No, but what you're saying is so absolutely true. And the problem we have today is that even with what all news stations still operate, so many of them do not go down the middle. And they're really not all news stations. They're some news headlines and then some opinion. And
Dick, that's a subject for another discussion that will take hours and hours and hours.
Yeah, for sure.
I agree with you.
You're right. Unfortunately, you're right.
Yeah.
We've lost our common platform, and that's something. It used to be that when you go to work in the morning, everybody had seen the same things the night before, and they had seen some kind of a balanced presentation, and we could talk about things civilly among ourselves. And that common platform has been lost as the spectrum was shattered, and we have thousands of opportunities now to get information. And I think we can only hope that somewhere we can get back to having some kind of a common voice that brings us back together again. But Harvey, thank you so much for the insights that you've given us about the internals of the thinking that goes into it. Early in my career in 67, 68, I remember doing pieces from Connecticut for CBS. I was at WINF, which was the CBS station at the time. So I was doing voicers in those early days. And we replicated that format during morning and afternoon drive time, even before POP became an all news station in the Hartford market. WINF was doing an all news wheel, very much copied on what WCBS had started in New York. And it will always be the gold standard.
Yeah, appreciate it. I appreciate the time to spend with you guys. You know, you should all hold your head up high for what you all accomplished in the industry, just as all of the folks at WCBS, you know, became a legacy radio station for the last 57 years or so. And, you know, hats off to everybody who's participated in what I think has been a glorious industry and has served the greater good for years and years and years. Thanks for having me, folks.
No, Harvey, that's great.
Thanks,
It's
Harvey.
great that so many of these guys were like part of the farm league, you know, when you listen to Pat and Joe talking about when he was at DRC and feeding reports to you guys. And, you know, it just what you've created and what you've brought along. I mean, I always go back to my dad, but he'd love to see his guys, you know, fly like that and to be able to be connected with, you know, with you and other stations all over the country and going into major markets. That's what it's always been about. That's what the whole friendship is all about. That's what Radio Friends Again is all about. We talk about the fact that, you know, we may be out of the business, but the business is still in us. And, you know, Harvey, we really, you know, I mean, we welcome you, please, anytime to come by, you know, and, you know, it's one of these things we say, stop in, drop in, stay for a couple of minutes, whatever. We try to do it every Friday morning and get together around 9:45 or so. But without, you know, when this happened, I was like, okay, so we know what we're going to talk about this week. But then it's great to connect with Joe and with Dick and with Barry and get the connection to you. And it's like, we were really saying, look, do we got the guy? Can I promote a guy? Have we got this guy? Because I want this guy for Friday morning. Have we got this guy? So it was so great, the combined effort to get you here. And it really...
Just sitting here thinking how a 30-year-old newscaster and or news director would respond to everything that we've spoken about.
I don't think they'd have anything to say.
I think they'd find it interesting. I think they'd find it interesting. I really do. But they don't have the chance, Bob, to be exposed to a discussion like this. That's the problem.
Yeah.
I have at least 5 people that have asked me for the link to this recording afterwards. that they couldn't join, but they were so fascinated by the fact that Harvey was going to join us, and we were going to really hear from the inside, the insights that you've shared. And it's been a pleasure knowing you all these years. And it's what's happened today is not the last time, as we know. And
Harvey, when did you start on CBS AM?
It was 1988.
I'm older than dirt. I really am. You know, I was at CBS FM when it was on the 17th floor, but I was there in 76. Everybody I see nowadays is younger than me. I'm going to go sit in the corner.
Was Joe the PD at that time?
No, it was Bill Brown who hired me. Actually, it was John Garand who interviewed me. Then it was Bill Brown who hired me. Then it was Jack Miller who programmed for a while, and that was it. You know, God, it was a long time ago. I had hair. Okay.
Excuse me.
Well, speaking of a long time ago, we should definitely. I want to thank TJ for our. We always try to wave the flag of the Broadcasters Foundation of America, because this is we're very, very supportive of that group, and TJ brought us into that world. And we know a lot of our fellow broadcasters out there are going through some challenges, whether it's financially or physically or emotionally, and our prayers go out to all of them. But if you ever think you've hit the wall, or you know somebody in the industry that may have hit the wall, just check out the Broadcasters Foundation of America, and they might be able to give you a helping hand. And I thank you guys for that. All right, guys.
Can I say one thing?
Sure, go ahead.
There's a lot of talent on this screen. We're kind of the core guys now. And if any ways can be found to keep what we do going, it's going to come from people like us. And I find the young people, when I did take some under my tutelage at WCBS, they were usually very interested to hear things like this, because they don't have PDs like Charlie Parker and Harvey Nagler to coach them as we did, as I had your dad coming up. Anyway,
Thank
I'm
you.
not ready. I'm not ready to give up hope on radio yet.
No way! Come on! If there's a microphone, I'll kill anybody that tries to take it out of my hand. Are you kidding me? Oh, you guys are the best, and it is about the passion. And I feel very bad for the people that sit back now and they comment from the sidelines and they say, well, you know, when I was in and I did this, and people that are on Facebook that were in the industry, and now they just sit back and say, well, you know, they put, whether they put a higher price on their head or whatever they do, anything is better than not being in it. And if you have it, and if it's in your blood, and literally in my blood, why else would you want to do anything? I mean, somebody said asked Jonathan Winter's wife one time, how come he doesn't show up on these big shows anymore? She goes, Jonathan has more fun going down to the corner gas station and laughing with the guys there in the service department. I mean, it's the passion. And if you sit back and you watch the parade go by, I feel sorry for you. But hopefully that's why we have shows here for you. Hey, listen, I'm Steve Parker. I'm going to get out of here. And as we always do, you know.
Plug the reunion.
Oh, yeah. Oh, God. Thank you. That's right. That's this weekend. This has been such a great reunion. Yep. And it's going to be this Sunday at Portland at Farrell's. And that's on Route 66 in Portland. And it's we do it on as close as we can get to August 18th.
Portland, Connecticut, please.
Yes. Portland, Connecticut. Sorry about that. And it goes from 1 to 5, and there's no ticket cost. I mean, you buy yours, I buy mine, you buy mine, I buy yours, whatever. And it is very it's in the true spirit of a radio get together. It's a reunion. There's no structure. Hang out, break off into little talks. We start at 1, we go until whenever you want to leave, whatever. But that's what it's about. We started it back in 2010. Ron and I got it going because DRC wasn't planning anything for 50 years of rock and roll when my dad flipped it on August 18th of 1960 to rock and roll. So that's how we started it. And we've always had the same philosophy as we do with this particular show. For this edition of Radio Friends, again, the 16th of August, 2024. Thank you to all of you, especially our special guest, Harvey Nagler, coming in from CBS. It means the world. And thanks for all of you guys. A great team effort pulling it together. And we'll catch you on the next edition of Radio Friends again.
Your friends, Radio Friends again. Radio again. We've got a lot to share.